right, well, to be respectful of everyone's time, we can go ahead and kick off this afternoon. Real quick before I hand it over to Kelly, just a few quick things. I want to thank you for joining us for today's webinar, A Place to Thrive, Building Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Your Talent Programs. And I do want to mention that this session is co-hosted by a few organizations locally. So just a quick shout out to them, the Champaign County EDC, the Champaign Center Partnership, the Community Foundation of East Central Illinois, the EDC of Decatur and Macon County, Parkland College Community Education, Parkland College Support for Workforce Training, the Rantoul Chamber of Commerce, the University of Illinois Research Park, and Visit Champaign County, along with, of course, our host organization, the Illinois SBDC at the Champaign County EDC. You will receive a recording of today's session that will go out first thing tomorrow morning. And you are also welcome to ask questions throughout the session. We just ask that you jot those down in the chat, and we'll keep an eye on it and answer them as we can. And we'll also make sure to cover them before we end today's session. So at this time, I'll hand it over to Kelly and we'll get started.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Jordan. And just shameless plug, I will be at Research Park tomorrow from noon to 1, talking about time management, if anybody is able to join that in person. Well, thanks everybody. And thanks, Jordan, for that lovely introduction and acknowledging all those groups that help make these events possible. Today, we're going to talk about a place to thrive, building diversity, equity, and inclusion into your talent programs. Just to introduce myself here, I've been in HR, kind of on the more strategic side of HR, not that policies and compliance are not strategic, but I've kind of always been on the leadership development side, employee assessment, performance coaching, training, things like that. I've worked in a number of different industries, which I'll talk about in a second, and have a master's degree in something called industrial and organizational psychology. So I really love kind of bringing together people and work and helping both individuals and organizations reach their highest potential. Through HR Full Circle, we offer a variety of different services that will help businesses grow. Some of my background here, a very diverse range of industries and companies here. My undergrad was at University of Minnesota. From there, I went to kind of a traditional utility company with Southern California Edison. And there, my perspective on diversity really kind of started to take shape. Edison at the time was actually under consent decree for having lost a class action lawsuit related to discrimination of minorities in promotion, training, and initial employment. So at the time I joined, they were already under this consent decree, meaning they had lost a class action lawsuit, and had some very prescribed solutions pertaining to job posting, internal posting, management approval for promotions. So some very large scale and very prescripted programs and solutions to try to mitigate discrimination in employment. From there, I moved to Starwood Hotels and Resorts. Starwood at the time, these properties listed here, somewhat blurry, pardon my bad screenshot, are all now owned by Marriott. But at the time, Starwood had 950 hotels in pretty much every country in the world. And so the concept of diversity and inclusion really gets on a broad scale. I mean, the broadest of scales when you're talking global, right? Having to make adjustments and learn about other cultures and other societies. And that makes sense, I think, when we're thinking about that on a global level. But for some reason, we're thinking about our neighbor or our coworker, we forget those kind of mannerisms, that it's rude to, certain hand gestures are rude in certain countries, certain words are rude. We know that for traveling internationally, and we make the effort usually when we travel internationally to learn a couple words of that other language. But again, sometimes, unfortunately, with our coworkers, we forget those bad manners, and we forget those manners, and we don't take enough effort to maybe learn a couple words of their language, see things from their perspective. That was kind of lesson number 2 in terms of diversity and inclusion. From there, I worked at the headquarters of Hot Topic in Torrid, which, if you ever shopped at the mall, you've got quite a range of perspectives represented in Hot Topic. Every style and genre of music, we listened to all kinds of music. And again, you had to kind of take the effort to learn and understand someone's perspective, someone's point of view, someone's attire, someone's music choice. So again, just kind of continuing down that path. And then here locally, I worked for 2 companies that have real strong U of I identities here, HD Smith and Hansen Professional Services. Again, Hansen doing projects all over the world, and lots of opportunities to both attract and include the right type of talent within our organization, but also to learn and understand projects that were being done around the world. So there's sort of a walk through my history, but also some of the things that have shaped my perspective on diversity and inclusion. Okay, so if we're going to talk about diversity and inclusion, how to build those things into your talent programs, we often talk about this as D&I or DE&I. I actually think that I would start first. So starting with inclusion should really be the starting place before you add diversity into your organization. So if I had to reinvent this whole professional discipline of D&I, DE&I, DEIB, I would actually start with I. Let's start with the inclusion. That perspective became an aha to me. I have to give credit where credit is due. From the book What If by Steve Robbins. And he defines, diversity and inclusion with these 2 definitions. Diversity being when you have more than one person in the room. If there's one or more, it's just me, which it is right now, I'm in this room by myself, not much diversity. But you start adding even one more person in the room and you have different life backgrounds, you may have different genders, different religions, different perspective, different socioeconomic status, different skin color, something. You're not identical unless it is your identical twin. Even then, you still have some things that are different. So diversity, anytime you have more than one person in the room. Inclusion, however, is when we can maximize the feeling of insiderness. I belong here. This is the right place for me. And minimize the concept of outsiderness. Words like they, them, we, us, you, that indicate that there are 2 different groups, right? One of us doesn't belong. So maximizing insiderness and feeling of belonging and feeling understood, and minimizing differences and that feeling of being an outsiderness. I also like this definition. Inclusion is not the absence of exclusion. It's the intentional and deliberate acts undertaken to ensure that others have that sense of belonging. Fantastic book if you are looking to work on your mindset of, hey, what if we saw it differently? And again, I think if you're about to travel to France, you would take the time to learn about that culture, to learn words like bonjour and s'il vous plaît and où est le train, right? Dove est le WC? Where's the bathroom? Or où est le WC? Excuse me, mixing languages. But anyway, you would take the time to do that research. When it's our neighbor, our friend, our coworker, the person at the cubicle across from us, we sometimes forget those good research practices. So I highly recommend this book. Here's another story that kind of is meant to separate the concepts of inclusion from diversity. This is not a picture of my actual child, but it's somewhat similar to what we were going through at the time. During COVID, early COVID, but March of 2020, late March of 2020, we lived kind of out in the country, and there were some chorus frogs that were singing. And my kids thought it would be very, very cool if we caught 2 of those froggies and we put them in a little terrarium on our porch, and they put the little grass in there and they were feeding them. And well, a day or 2 later, all of a sudden we had froggy eggs in our little terrarium. And after another couple of weeks, we had a bunch of tadpoles. Well, we had a fish tank, so we added those tadpoles to the fish tank. And we also had fish, but they all got along. So we had diversity happening in the fish tank, tadpoles and fish living harmoniously. Well, eventually the tadpoles grew legs, and they were going to need rocks to get out of the water, and dry land and different food. And so we had to look at how can we make this environment more inclusive for all of the species and what they need. And so if we drained all the water out, that would hurt the fish, right? They would have enough room to swim. if we left the water high, the tadpoles would suffer and they would not be able to get out. So now we have this concept of we have diversity, but we don't have an inclusive environment that works for both species. And what we ended up doing in this case was we got a bigger fish tank and we let some of the tadpoles go. Too many. We kept 2 or 3 of them and we kept the 3 fish. So we got a bigger fish tank where we could keep enough water for the fish, but also build it up high enough that the frogs could get out and have their dry space to be able to use their little legs. So there's kind of a story of if you add diversity before you have that inclusive environment, your environment may not be ready to handle the amount of diversity that you're wishing to achieve. So you have to look at your environment and say, is it inclusive? I have personalized this story to my situation. However, again, I will give the Steve Robbins book, What If, kind of credit for that inspiration of that story. So you have to take a look at your organization and say, are we inclusive? Right? And here's sort of a self-check. Oh, boom, all the bullets at once. Inclusive thinking is about respect, curiosity, understanding, belonging. Again, maximizing insiderness. Does your workplace feel respectful? Is it open-minded? Is it welcoming to different opinions, needs, suggestions, etc.? Or when those questions come up, are people told, that's not how we do things here? That's not inclusive. That'll never work. Those types of comments. Is your leadership team approachable and responsive to the questions, concerns, and needs of employees at all levels? If you're getting, pushback and like, that's a ridiculous request. People these days, what are they thinking? Words like that, probably not feeling real inclusive. And you may need to start there with some education and some stories and some coaching with those leaders. Do leaders seek to build relationships with all employees? Things like proactively and with intention, reaching out to people, sitting by them at lunch, inviting them for coffee, striking up conversations, seeking out opinions, etc. Good leaders should be thinking, am I connecting with everyone on my team, not just people who are like me? Another checkbox here to just test your level of inclusive thinking. Do employees work to include each other in conversations, activities, decisions, etc.? Or is there evidence of clicking together, or even worse, complaining about they, them, other, those types of words being used? When I worked at Hot Topic, I'll just sidebar on inclusive, one of the words we were not allowed to say was the word them. You could not use the word them in conversation, meaning like them at the store across town, or them at corporate, or them at the Tennessee distribution office. You had to kind of reframe that conversation in the mindset of we are all one team. Us, we, our colleagues in Tennessee, our peers at the store across town, instead of they, them. So if you're hearing a lot of they, them, other type of thinking and language, your organization may not yet be at that level of inclusivity. 5 human truths here, again, kind of referenced in the definitions of diversity and inclusion. We want to belong. We want to be understood. We want to feel special. We want to reach our potential. We want to be in control. These were 5 human truths we taught everybody at Hot Topic. At Starwood. So 5 human truths that we taught everybody. You had to memorize them. You had to try to maximize this feeling in every interaction. And all leaders had to go through a full day of training on how to achieve these objectives. So again, maximizing that feeling of inclusion, that I belong, I am understood here, I feel special being here, I can reach my potential here, and I have some degree of control over my level of success here. And again, if you can't check these boxes, you may want to work on this piece before you start adding diversity as its own objective. Have to have inclusion first. So self-assess, course correct, coach, prepare your crops for planting, and then you can add some diversity. So when you think about adding diversity to your organization, and as we go through here, and I'm sure I'm probably there's many different takes on this topic these days. Mine is coming from my perspective. And that may be different than other perspectives. So I certainly welcome questions about mindset framing or anything that I'm talking about here. So feel free to jump those questions in the chat and we will keep an eye on that and answer them. All right, so when we think about diversity in your business, a good place to start with is, who do you serve in your business? Do you serve multiple genders? Well, then multiple genders should probably be working at your organization. Do you serve different ethnicities, different personalities, different ages, different hair colors, people from different states? I'm from Wisconsin, thus the Packers thing there. Do you serve both Packers and Bears fans, or closer to the Indiana border there, Colts fans? Left-handed and right-handed people, Pepsi and Coke drinkers, you get the point. So, casting that broader net in terms of your inside of your organization means being able to serve a wider audience on the outside of your organization. Another really good book, more about branding than diversity and inclusion specifically, is called Brand on the Inside. And in some, you will never be able to deliver something on the outside to your customers or clients, et cetera, if you cannot first live it on the inside. If you're not living it on the inside and you're trying to put on this mask or this persona that you can, get on the stage and deliver for your customers, it will feel like you're faking it. You have to live it on the inside. So think, who do we serve? Who's our target customer? Who's our target audience? And how can we live that on the inside to better serve that audience? Okay. And then we will go through these pieces here in more detail, but where are there opportunities to increase diversity in your business? Pretty much everywhere across your whole talent spectrum, from how you attract and hire talent. Obviously, people think of that first. We need to hire more diversity. Well, how do you then assess and promote diversity? What does your leadership team look like? Are you teaching these behaviors? Good leadership, by definition, is inclusive. Are you teaching that as part of your leadership or promotional training? Are you incorporating that into your promotional decisions? Access to training. Oh, something is beeping. I apologize. Access to training in your organization. That is another opportunity to look at, we're bringing people in. Are they going to training at the same rate? Are they getting promoted at the same rate? You have to look at those numbers. Social events and company parties. I'll give some examples about that, but that's another opportunity to say, does this work for everyone, right? If you're having a golf outing at the men's country club, obviously that's not going to work for all your employees, I would think. And conversely, let's all go get our nails done, right? Your male employees are going to go, some of them might like it, but some are going to go, that's not for me. So you have to make sure that your company events and social events are representative as well. Committees, benefits programs, communication, etc. We had I'm going to talk about all these more in detail here. So pretty much anywhere along the employee life cycle, you could stop and say, diversity here, diversity here, diversity here, diversity here. So, make that list. What are the different elements of our employee life cycle? And are we being intentional with our diversity efforts in that program? Right. So let's break these down and continue to go on. So those are opportunities to increase diversity. We've talked about inclusion. So you have to then look at your equal employment opportunity, your equity, your fairness. Again, we'll throw out some more terms and definitions here, but we'll break these programs down one by one. Here's another story. Again, this one out of the Steve Robbins book, but he talks about one time being at a hotel and accidentally walking into the women's bathroom and didn't see the sign on the door. This is obviously not the same bathroom. Accidentally walks in there. There's no one around. He uses the bathroom and he goes, oh, wow, that's interesting. There are 5 stalls in the ladies' room, just like there are 5 stalls in the men's room. That's fair, or he thinks that that's fair. Well, then at break time at the conference that he's at, he sees no line for the men's room and he sees a long line for the ladies' room. And he goes, oh, what I thought was fair, I now realize is equal. Both had 5 stalls. However, in the ladies' room, of course, all participants are using the stall, and ladies tend to do more things in the restroom. They're fixing their hair, they're fixing their makeup, they're in there longer. They might be having a private conversation. They may be just getting a little piece of quiet, stepping away from the situation, a little moment of privacy. And so what was equal, both had the same, was not really fair in terms of the use of the space. People have different uses for that space. So, again, going back to even the fish and the tadpoles, different uses for the space. What do we need it for? And can we accommodate that so that everyone feels like they belong, they're understood, they feel respected, they have control? Going back to those 5 human truths. When you're looking at your efforts, or hopefully the result of your efforts, or you're setting goals to try to improve your efforts, what's measured gets managed, right? So what is most compelling to your objectives? I was talking to a small business startup the other day, and they said, there's 5 or 6 of us working here now. We're all dudes, and we don't want it to be a dude fest. How can we attract more diversity into our organization? We would like to really make sure that we have females also working here. And we think that would be good to live it on the inside so we can deliver it on the outside. We want to be appealing to a broader audience. So they're going to start there. You may have different needs in your business. Physical abilities, veteran status, age of your employees, etc. Start there and say, what do we need to be able to live on the inside such that we can deliver it better on the outside? That's always a way to get started. And, keep an eye on it. Use that data as a report out. You don't need to set quotas. That's a bad word. But, have some targets for what you think you need to live better on the inside in order to be able to reach a broader audience on the outside, and make sure that you're understanding that customer by bringing that talent into your organization. And it may be something else for you, but start there. Data points, I wouldn't go out and start up a whole new BI reporting engine or data dashboard around these things, but pay attention. Do you have any voluntary EEO data you can report on? That's voluntary data. Of course, it's not linked to their application. Many applicant tracking systems will collect this after the fact, but that may be a reportable source of data. Not to say who is what, but what kind of data do we have? What mix of applicants are we getting on some of these factors of interest? And if not the right mix, how can we get more of the type of applicants that we would like to reach? You might look at, who are we hiring, right? Did we hire 6 more dudes, or were we able to attract some females into the organization? Who's getting promoted? That's a data point. Are we only, if our entry level ratio is 50-50 male and female, 50-50 majority minority groups, some other data point, who's getting promoted? Is it the case that your top level of your organization looks different than your bottom level? That's a sign that there is a disconnect somewhere in the training and promotional ranks. So who's applying to be promoted? Who's actually getting promoted? What do the pictures on your org chart look like? Are they representative of that front line of your organization? Pay, are there gender or any ethnic disparities in pay that you might want to pay attention to? Who's using your benefits? Those are something to pay attention to. Engagement results, if you can look at employee engagement by subgroup, that's always a good data point to say, hey, do different people feel differently here? And that can very well be the case. I've looked at employee engagement data and said, for some reason, your male employees are much less happy working here. Why could that be? Let's hypothesize and see what we can do about it. And then finally, representation at your company events is something to look at as well. 2 stories here. When we look at benefits, we had worked in an organization where we had a lot of older white males. And one of the benefits of interest was long-term care, nursing home insurance, essentially. But our younger employees were not, so we have to have this policy. We think it's essential. We rolled out the policy. Not that many people used it. But our younger employees, when asked, well, how come this isn't of interest to you? They're thinking, hey, I only have so many benefit dollars to go around. And what I want is childcare offsets, right? I want a childcare benefit. So you have to pay attention to those demographic differences and offer, not what a vocal minority might be asking for, but what do your employees actually want? So do that research and pay attention to who's using which benefits. I'll tell you another example about company events. How does that relate back to diversity? I worked for a company once that was going to have a big milestone celebration. I think it was 50 years in business. And that organization said, we should have a fancy party. We should have a gala. Let's call it a gala. And we'll have it at a fancy place and people can get dressed up and it'll be fantastic. Well, that was a great idea for perhaps some of the corporate staff, but the warehouse staff found themselves going, I don't need fancy clothes to wear to a fancy party. I don't think this is an event for me. And we're deciding to stay home. So the company had to think of some creative ways. And I think they actually came up with a wardrobe stipend or something similar, not called that, but that were able to kind of offset that. Another example, a company one time was going to have their summer event at a water park. And again, the young families with kids thought it was great. Some of the older employees were like, I'm not putting on a swimsuit at the water park. So it takes some effort, but try to find those events that pertain to everybody, make everyone feel included in your organization. So again, think about that employee life cycle. Anywhere there's a step in your employee life cycle, you may be thinking, what data can I look at that would help me to measure my efforts in either inclusion or diversity? Okay. And again, feel free to ask some questions. We'll keep going here. So some ways to increase diversity. Boy, if you go back 20 years ago, let's say find the diversity job boards, blackengineers.org and womeninmedicine.com and, those sorts of affinity groups. And those are still out there, but just to lob your job posting over to those organizations is not going to solve your problem. You need to start building relationships with those communities, start more conversations, ask more questions, and build those relationships with those different associations, those different affinity groups, and with the employees you already have who come from the backgrounds and the perspectives that you want to increase. So have some real conversations with people. And again, you're one Black employee who does not feel at home in your organization is not going to send their friends, right? You have to have real inclusion, make people who join your organization feel like they belong, feel special, feel like they can reach their potential before they're going to want to add their diversity connections into the mix. So again, inclusion first will help you to increase your diversity. Advocate for affinity groups, be an ally, invest your time, and to measure the results of those efforts, go back to your data and reassess, recalibrate. Okay. And you have to get below the surface. We think about spotting problems with inclusion in our workplace. There's this sort of above the surface things that are easy to spot: blatant racism, harassment, bullying, anti-inclusive behavior. There's some things that are very easy to spot. And we see that bobber disappear below the surface. We go, see, I'm great at this. I saw it right away. Well, you're not seeing what's under the surface. You have to be asking enough questions. You have to be building strong enough relationships that you can see what your organization is like 2 or 3 or 4 layers below where your vantage point is. So don't just look at the surface and say, well, I'm not aware of any problems. Well, go ask some questions. What is it really like to work here? Do you feel like you belong? What would make that better? Do you feel understood when you work here? Those questions in your employee engagement survey, or strike them up in a conversation over lunch, and build those relationships so that you can get that information, get the truth. Don't just hide above the surface. Okay. And then, again, examining fairness, and we'll break down some of these different programs here, but boy, fairness around remote work has really become a rapidly changing situation. So many employers have since said, yeah, you know what, we can work remotely. Boy, that really helps people with small or school-aged children, people possibly with babies who may need backup care, all kinds of different people benefiting from remote work. So can you be flexible with those types of arrangements? Disability status. If I can work from my own home with all of my own accommodations already in place, oh my gosh, I could do great work for you. So those types of flexible arrangements can help make things more fair. Transportation credits. I think people need assistance getting to your place of employment. Childcare reimbursement. Any of these types of programs here are going to help you reach a broader audience. If you're interested in bringing more females or more young parents of any gender, you may want to look at childcare reimbursement, transportation credits, expanding reasons for use of sick time. The state of Illinois is kind of taking care of that one for us, but personal days and holidays that align to your mission. Time donations, emergency grants or loans of time, PTO donations, PTO buyouts or sellbacks. Those can all be good opportunities to allow people some flexibility to make their employment situation work for them. And again, I kind of gave my company event examples, but just making sure your company events and opportunities are accessible to everyone. People need the space for different things. How can you try to include as many of those different viewpoints and variations as you can think of? Okay, so let's break down a couple of these programs. And again, any questions? I know I talk fast and I'm throwing some jargon at you and some terms and definitions. So please don't be shy about asking questions. Okay. All right, let's look at hiring. So building relationships and partnerships. You have to think at a broader level than just posting to more job boards. So building those relationships. Many professions do have diversity affinity groups dedicated to the advancement of traditionally underrepresented groups. Here's a random smattering of some here on the screen. But, again, it's not enough just to say, here, post my job. It is going to be better if you can build that relationship. How can we help you? How can we contribute to your cause? How can we be a partner or an ally to you in your mission? So engage those groups in dialogue and take the time to get to know them. If you're the National Society of Black Engineers, all companies want your highly qualified engineers. So the ones that are going to have the most success are going to be the ones who take the time to, again, be an ally, be outspoken for that cause, help support that cause, be a partner to them. So take the time, get to know them, build that relationship. So. Okay. So some opportunities there in the hiring process, and then really do put your selection process under a microscope. Unconscious bias can creep into your hiring process in a number of different ways. Anyone who touches your hiring process should be trained in unconscious bias. And by that, there's so many beyond just protected groups. There are so many opportunities for bias that you're like me, that I have a bias against a certain style of handshake or attire or your size, whether you're thin or fat or muscular, athletic looking or not. There's so many different sources of unconscious bias that are not job related. So you have to challenge that thinking, and you really should train anyone who is involved in your hiring process in unconscious bias. You could consider, can hiring managers, can you review candidates or have a discussion about candidates without names? Of course, last names and first names can be a source of bias. Can you standardize your resume screening criteria? Ask everyone the same questions. Standardize your interview questions. Use objective assessments. There are many, I work a lot specifically with personality assessments. Good performance tools, and do your research, do have to demonstrate fairness and equity in their statistical fairness and equity in their results. So, but do your research. There are lots of products on the market that really aren't meant to be used for selection. But when you can find a good one, sometimes a good objective job assessment has helped me go to a hiring manager and say, here's a candidate who meets everything you're looking for. And I can prove it essentially with this data. So, and make it easy for people to participate in your process. Flexible interview scheduling, if you're trying to attract in-demand talent who might already have jobs, an evening interview or an early morning or a lunchtime interview might make it easier for them to participate. Okay. So, think about all those different steps in your hiring process. And here's why this is important, I think. And I'll give you a little data example here. So let's say that you post a position and you get 20 applicants. That'd be great. Some jobs are struggling to find qualified talent these days. If you post your job, you get 20 applicants. That is fantastic. Oh God, 3 of them. I can't even pronounce their name. I bet they're going to need sponsorship. I don't think that's, I think I'm just going to not spend as much time on those resumes. Oh, but here's 4 who were referred to me from other people who probably look and sound a lot like me. They went to my school. I'll put those in the good pile. I like those ones. Then I'll do some phone screening, and some of them, gosh, the accent, I'm just not sure. They spelled that word wrong. I'm not sure those are going to work. So I might just hold on those. A couple of them couldn't get off work to make it to their interview, or had childcare issues, or some other conflict, family emergency. And then, of the ones that are left, I just, the final 2 here, one of them I just don't think is the right culture fit. But gosh, I found this one. I guess they're another white lady just like me, but I guess that's the best I can get. I'll just have to hire them. These are the sort of subtle, subconscious conversations that people have in their heads about their hiring process. They're not all intentional, although I've, put some of them sound kind of blatant here on the screen, but a lot of times they're subtle. We might not say these things out loud. We might not even think these things out loud. But subtly, what was 20 applicants in a very diverse applicant pool ends up being one more status quo hire. The one that really, they all obviously, the names and accents and things like that are certainly more blatant. But the one that really I always will challenge for sure when I hear it, because it's very subtle, is culture fit. I just don't think they're a culture fit. I personally am of the belief that my little HR radar goes off when I hear culture fit, and I want to know, explain that to me in a way that is job related. Usually what it means is they don't look like me, they don't sound like me, their name doesn't sound like mine, and I think they're from somewhere that I'm not from. And I think you need to challenge that type of thinking when you hear they're not a culture fit. These little tiny decisions along the way and these subtle biases that will result in one more insider or kind of status quo hire within your organization. You have to challenge this type of thinking. Okay. So that's our hiring process. We're going to be aware of our biases. We're going to do some training on that. We're going to standardize our tools and process. We're going to look at our data. We're going to challenge the dreaded, not a culture fit, dismissal of otherwise quality diversity applicants. So now you have people hired. Let's talk about retaining them, promoting them, and developing them. Bringing in new faces and abilities is great. But if your new hire can't find affinity or personal connection at work, they're going to feel like, I don't belong. I'm not understood. I have no control here. I can't reach my potential, right? 4 of our 5 human truths. So you have to be intentional about making new hires feel welcome. Having a great friend at work is a great predictor of first-year retention. So your new hire onboarding should include introductions to current employees, team building activities to help new employees and current employees feel like they're all human. They're all cut from the same cloth. Helping them make those connections, finding things in common, understanding differences, things like that. Facilitating those types of connections will help people get to know each other faster. And take a look at things like your policies, your dress code? Are they overly conservative in regards to etiquette, attire, hairstyles, tattoos, etc.? So, you have to kind of keep up with the times too. I know a healthcare client I had that used to feel like they were very traditional and would not hire people with blue hair or pink hair are now thinking, I don't care what their hair looks like. Will they show up? Right. So you do have to kind of keep with the times and evolve your policies and procedures in regard to the changing times. So making sure that people feel that human connection at work, finding someone that they would like to become friends with at work, helping to facilitate those introductions and those things that people have in common is great at contributing to retention. Otherwise, you'd be searching all over again. Okay. Again, training. We can learn to recognize bias. We can learn to have empathy and how to embrace people with different thoughts, opinions, perspectives, backgrounds, looks, sounds, etc. So good training can teach those skills and help communicate your organization's culture of inclusion. You have to put that stake in the ground and say, this is how we're going to act here, if you want to build that culture. So professional development, eliminating manager approvals for access to training or promotions. This one was huge. When I worked at an organization I mentioned earlier that had lost a class action lawsuit and was under consent decree, this was a huge part of the solution. So when an individual contributor wanted to transfer departments or seek a promotion, maybe to a supervisor position, their current manager had to approve that. Well, unconscious biasly, those managers were more likely to say yes if those employees were white, unfortunately, and less likely if they were African American. And of course, a class action lawsuit, company lost, etc. So that whole concept of manager approval went away. If you want to apply for transfer or promotion, go ahead and apply. There's no manager approval needed. Now, if you actually get the new position, the company would then agree to work with your manager on the timeline for that transition. But if it was a promotion, you would get your new rate of pay, which was higher. And, we'll work with you on the timing of exactly when you're going to make that move. So it just allowed less opportunity, which took away one decision point in the process that created more opportunity for people to raise their hand and say, hey, what about me? I'm interested in that upward mobility, that promotion, that transfer, that job change, etc. So allow people to have more control to reach their potential, right? Going back to our human truths. And then using mentor programs, sponsorship programs, affinity groups, things like that can really help facilitate development. I've done a lot of mentor programs where people say, hey, I want a mentor who understands what I'm going through. A gay employee saying, I want to know how this other gay employee got to where they are. I would love to have them as a mentor. Black affinity groups, Black mentor pairings, LGBTQ pairings, all kinds of different, female mentors, things like that. So it's okay to have successful employees who reach that higher level, reach back and bring new employees up with them. So facilitating some mentor pairings there can be real helpful as well, at least opening that up, allowing those opportunities. And again, train everybody involved in that process. Okay. As you bring those new faces and abilities into your organization, you have to just make sure again that your training opportunities, your leadership opportunities, your promotional opportunities, et cetera, there has to be equal opportunity at all steps of the process. So again, back to the class action lawsuit, rather than like tapping someone and say, hey, I've got a supervisor position opening up, I'd like to put you in it. Allow internal candidates to apply, right? Post your jobs internally. Employees want that equal opportunity to pursue promotions and advancement. You might have someone who's very qualified for that promotion who just looks or sounds different than you and is not on your radar. So allow those people to apply and communicate vacancies internally. And then, going back to those hiring recommendations, this is a hiring process. When you're deciding to promote or transfer an individual, you have to make sure, again, all those biases that could creep into your process and turn 20 great applicants into one more status quo hire, you have to follow all those same guardrails. So, okay. Managing diversity within your leadership and culture. Let's touch on that. You want to make sure and help people get a seat at the table. So things like affinity groups can provide a great place for like-minded individuals to find partnership, feel connected, hone their voice, build relationships with management as a group rather than just one employee with some feedback. Leadership should engage those employees or affinity groups in dialogue. What's it like to work here? Do you feel understood? Do you feel like you belong? So use those affinity groups if you're large enough to have them to provide that feedback and be willing to have the tough conversations. I think a lot of times we don't ask because we're afraid of the answer, right? That the answer could be uncomfortable or shocking or not what I want to hear. So rather than have that tough conversation, I might just rather, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, and not have those tough conversations. So that's a warning sign too. If you find yourself procrastinating, like, gosh, I wonder what it's like for that employee to work here. Go ask them. Don't hesitate to have that conversation because you're afraid of what you might hear. And I understand it is not easy. We're happy at work to keep things very generic. How was your weekend? How's the weather? How about that sports team? We're comfortable in that space. Maybe even we're comfortable in a one-on-one setting to have work-related conversations, but we have to start to give feedback or give soft skills feedback or do performance reviews. Like we start, like as managers, we don't like doing those things as much. But we would rather terminate someone or have to talk about uncomfortable, awkward personal issues and hygiene and dress code at work than have to talk about the really tough stuff of race, gender, politics, religion at work. We don't want to do it. It's at the top of the discomfort scale for most people at work. So you have to go in with a curious mindset and non-defensive, learning focused, humble. What's your experience like working here? How could it be better? How could we attract a broader audience here within our workplace? So focusing on that conversational capacity, having constructive, learning focused, non-defensive dialogue is a critical skill for any organization. And it will help you deal with even your most troublesome or worrisome workplace issues. So the better you can get at talking about difficult things at work will make your organization smarter, stronger, and more resilient. And, those conversations can be awkward, difficult, uncomfortable, and that's a sign that it's important. So don't let that awkwardness block your road to progress. Start, if you need to build up some conversational capacity, start having one-on-ones with your direct reports. What are you working on? How's it going? How can I help? And over time, layer in those personal topics, build that trust, build that relationship. And then it's okay to go there because I know you've invested the time in me that you care. And now I'm more willing to open up and share with you my personal experience about working here. Same with skip level conversations, meaning if you're a manager of managers, you should talk to your people's direct reports. So, how is Johnny as a manager? Is he a good manager? Do you feel respected? Do you feel valued? You can ask those questions in skip level conversations or surveys, and really get to know people. Ask their opinions, build those relationships, share a meal or coffee with them, and build that trust such that people will want to tell you the awkward, difficult, and uncomfortable stuff. You have to break down those barriers. Otherwise, you're going to stay at that bobber level, floating along the top and thinking, oh, nope, no bobbers. I don't see any racism or sexism. I guess everything's fine. You have to dig below the surface to your staff, their staff, and build those relationships to break down those barriers to trust. Okay. And instead of, be a little bit bolder as well. When you hear those painful phrases, again, to me, one trigger for me is they're not a culture fit. well, explain that to me in a way that's job related. But other things like that won't work. That's not how we do it. They, them type of language, that's sort of toxic othering type of language. Us, we, they, them, those are toxic words. So challenge those assumptions. Well, what if, going back to the title of the Steve Robbins book, well, what if we did try it? What if it did work? What if we gave it a shot, right? So you could say, instead of those other comments, well, tell me more about that. What do you mean by that? Could we explore that a little? Are you open to talking about it or thinking about it? Can you share more about why you feel that way? And maybe sometimes you might have to say, well, at this point, I see it differently. Can I share my perspective? But non-defensive, open-minded, learning focused should be the mindset for these conversations. If you're looking to maintain status quo, put up your defenses and say things like that won't work. It's not how we do it. They're not a culture fit. What are they thinking? Who are they to, demand this? Kids these days, all those kind of things. But if you really want to dig in and learn and understand, try saying things more like, well, tell me more about that. Or what do you mean by that? Can you explain more about that? Why is that important to you? So ask more questions and build up your non-defensive, learning focused conversational capacity. Okay. All right. Kind of wrap up here. We'll save some time for any questions that do happen to come in. So just to kind of wrap up, did I skip a slide there? I'm sorry. Sorry for the back and forth. Just to recap, we're in the habit of saying diversity and inclusion. I would say start with inclusion, build up your inclusion, and then add diversity. Is this an inclusive place to work? Are we open-minded? Are we tolerant? Are we flexible? Are we curious? Are we adaptable? And if not, then work on those things first. And then think, how can we add diversity? What diversity do we need to add? What is the lay of the land in your organization with things like equal employment, fairness, and equity? Put that microscope up to all of your people programs and look at the data. What's it telling you? And then get that conversation started so that you can build your conversational capacity. You can learn what it is that people want and need in your organization to create that culture that you're looking for. So, well, that kind of ends our presentation here today. I did leave some time for questions, although I don't see any coming in yet. If you don't want to ask here in this forum, I have put all my digits and my letters and numbers up on the screen here if you want to reach me. Kelly at hrfullcircle.com or office or cell phone is there as well. So thank you all for your time and attention today. I hope this was informative.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And like you said, there are no questions right now, but sometimes I know it's a lot of information and can be kind of overwhelming. So Kelly said, if, like she said, if there is something that you think about later, or when I send out the recording, maybe you're revisiting something she said and it triggers something for you and you have a question, please feel free to reach out. We do have another webinar with Kelly coming up in May during National Small Business Week, which is the first week of May. So I will also drop the link for that in the chat in case anyone would like to join us for that. And that's a new session that we haven't done with Kelly before, and it's getting started with HR technology. So if that's something that may be of interest to you.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much. Oh, and you put that event there. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yes, and the Research Park one is there too as well. So if anyone's local and is interested in that, that is a no-cost session as well. They do ask that you register because they do provide lunch, which is always nice at the Research Park that they do that for their attendees.
They do. I'm looking forward to it. Last time we had some delightful Chinese food. It was lovely.
Ooh.
Tomorrow, I'm talking about time management for busy people. If any of you are U of I folks, feel free to stop by. They just told me we've got 35 registered for tomorrow. So
wow.
Yeah.
Great turnout.
All right. Well, thank you, Jordan. I always appreciate you hosting and appreciate everybody taking the time to participate today. I hope everybody has a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.